Weekend forecast here exclusively on 13 WMAZ Plus. We're going to help you plan out everything that you need to know weather-wise for any outdoor plans this weekend, and obviously some event-specific forecasts, and we'll talk about what's in store as we head into the next week here in Central Georgia. So let's kick it off with Future View and go ahead and flash forward to your Friday afternoon plans. Right there around that evening commute time on Friday, we still have the possibility of a couple spotty showers in Central Georgia, just like we had Thursday and just like we did have Wednesday. So these showers are mainly going to come in the isolated form, meaning only one end of the county is very likely to receive something in the way of rainfall. Most of Central Georgia is going to remain dry, mostly sunny. And then you take a look at 5 p.m. It looks like those spotty shower chances do continue to slim down. That will be a trend day by day that we see over the course of this weekend. As you approach sunset, your temperatures get cooler. That's when we're looking at our rain chances to really decrease in nature. You can still see trying to hold on to a couple of sprinkle showers by about the 8 p.m. hours. But overall, I do believe conditions are going to start to clear out as you head into the night each and every day. We go overnight into early Saturday morning. Still a few sprinkles in the near vicinity of Central Georgia, but do those pop up over Central Georgia? We definitely have the potential for a few light showers to remain in the forecast for Saturday morning. But once again, Saturday afternoon, I think it's going to be a very similar story to what we have in store for your Friday afternoon. A shower or two here and there. Overall, whatever falls in the way of rain is going to be fairly short-lived. You may have some pockets of steady rain. You may have some heavy rain, and along with that, maybe a stray rumble of thunder or two. But the chances of you seeing rain are very slim over the course of Friday and Saturday. And just like what we have in store for your Friday afternoon, the rain chances are trying to hang around a little bit longer on Saturday, but overall I do think the potential for rain decreases as you head into the overnight hours, but doesn't completely go away. Still a few light showers in the forecast as you're walking out the door heading to church on Sunday morning, going into Sunday afternoon. This is kind of the timing that rain chances have begun to pop up in the picture both Friday and Saturday. It looks like your rain chances really slim down as we go into Sunday afternoon. So right now, Sunday does look like the best of the bunch for any outdoor plans this weekend, but still only about a 10 or a 20% chance of rain each and every day over the course of your weekend. So a brief shower is going to be possible for tailgate time for your football Friday night forecast, and also some warm temperatures still hovering around the 90-degree mark if you don't catch any rain, which, like I said, most of Central Georgia, that is going to be the scenario that plays out. As you go into kickoff, temperatures around 81 degrees as you fastly approach the sunset hour, and then 75 degrees as conditions get clearer and cooler heading into final score time. Obviously, if you head into overtime for any of your games, your numbers are going to be even lower than that 75-degree mark, and this is just a relative number. Not all of Central Georgia going to be exactly at these numbers at these specific times. Some areas will be a little bit warmer. Some areas will be a little bit cooler, especially those areas that do catch a shower and have a bit of rain-cooled air in the forecast. So your weekend outlook, 91 for a high temperature on Friday with a 20% chance of seeing an afternoon shower, then down to 90 degrees, but still predominantly the same forecast for Saturday as what we have on Friday. High temperature of 90, starting out in the low 60s. Once again, some areas a little bit warmer, some areas maybe closer to that 63-degree mark. Then 64 for a morning low temperature as you walk out the door on Sunday. That's still going to have a very pleasant feel in the air. I know these numbers are a little bit warmer than, say, the upper 50s, the mid 50s, which we have forecasted for a couple of days, but overall, it's not going to maybe have as much of a fall feel in the air, but it is going to feel very pleasant. Anytime you can get temperatures in the 60s, it is definitely going to be a win, especially compared to the upper 80s and near 90, which we're forecasting for every afternoon as we head across the course of this weekend. Rain chances are down slightly as you go into Sunday, but I still wouldn't count on seeing rain any of the next 3 days. So Georgia Tech is the only football team in the state of Georgia that is at home this weekend. They will be squaring off against the Temple Owls up at Bobby Dodd Stadium. That kickoff going to be at a bit of an odd time, 4:30 in the afternoon, and I do think some shower chances are going to be possible up in the Atlanta area. Right there as you're tailgating, right past the midday hour, going into game time, some rain could still linger in the forecast. Temperatures somewhere in the mid 80s, maybe even a little bit higher if you don't catch any rain. But conditions will clear out just like here in Central Georgia as you are heading home. That sunset time going to be at 7:36, so you'll still have a bit of light in the sky at 8 p.m. if that's the time that you're heading out of Atlanta, maybe heading back here to Central Georgia. 77 degrees should be your temperature, and maybe a little bit closer to the 80-degree mark mark if you don't catch any rain up in the Atlanta area. Your weekend grillcast, it is green spatulas. Go ahead and fire up the grill each and every afternoon. Yes, we do have those rain chances Friday and Saturday afternoons, and along with that, we do have a minuscule rain chance on Sunday. I still don't think many of you are going to catch those showers, so I do think that most of Central Georgia will have a green spatula forecast. If you do happen to come across a shower over your select area, then just express some caution. But like I said, these rain chances and these spotty showers are going to be very short-lived, probably last about 10 to 15 minutes in time. Then they'll be out of the picture and conditions will be suitable to fire up the grill. So green spatulas all weekend long. It's always a great weekend when we can put those on your grill cast instead of putting some of those red spatulas that tell you to order in each and every day, maybe having a DoorDash night. But none of those look to be in store for Friday, Saturday, or Sunday this weekend. Pool forecast. This may be your last opportunity to actually head out to the pool. Obviously, we'll talk about what that temperature outlook looks like for the extended forecast. I forgot to remove the thunderstorm icon from last weekend. I just think you have a chance of a spotty shower or two, but still going to be a great weekend to go enjoy that pool, that last little bit of warm water that you do have in the pool. 88 to 91 is your temperature range each and every afternoon this weekend. Feels like the low 90s, so we'll have a little bit of humidity in the forecast that maybe makes the numbers feel like 93 or 94. That's at the very most. I do believe most areas will probably hover below that threshold. And a bit of an east-northeasterly breeze at some portions of this weekend. That's mainly looking to be a factor on Saturday and Sunday afternoons. Don't quite necessarily think it's going to be anything in the form of really gusty winds, only sustained winds from about 5 to 10 miles per hour at times. 7:33, kind of your average sunset time this weekend. I believe it's exactly 7:34 for Friday night, 7:33 on Saturday, and 7:32 on Sunday evening. So I went with that middle ground sunset time. Average high this time of year, 87 degrees. Each of these afternoons are expected to climb just above average or right at your average high temperature over the foreseeable future. Then speaking of the sunset times, those are going to continue to get earlier and earlier, and the exact opposite of your sunrise, it's going to get later and later. So September 22nd, that's going to be the first day of fall. That's actually going to be on Monday itself. Sunrise at 7:22, sunset at 7:30 flat. So just over 12 hours of daylight for the first official day of the fall season. That's astronomical fall. We started meteorological fall at the beginning of September, but September 22nd is going to mark that kind of halfway point from when the Earth's axis is tilted a little bit farther away from the sun as opposed to tilted towards the sun, where in the northern hemisphere we obviously see those warmer temperatures when the Earth's axis is tilted towards the sun. That marks the official first date of summer. And then as we progress through the month of October, sunrise at 7:38, sunset just after 7 p.m., indicating under 11 and a half hours of daylight as we progress maybe about 3 or 4 weeks into the future from this first date. And then November 2nd, that's also an important date because that's when daylight saving time will be ending. So that's going to indicate the fall back time when we have to switch the clocks. Still have a ways to go before we get there, but then you will notice your sunrise gets a lot earlier, actually before the 7 a.m. hour as we go into the first couple days of November, 6:53 to be exact for that sunrise on November 2nd. But also we're going to see that shift in the sunset, get an hour earlier. So this would typically be around 6:42 if we didn't have a time change. But of course we fall back. The sunset is going to set before the sun is going to set before the 6 p.m. hour, and then that's going to be under 11 hours of daylight, 10 hours and 48 minutes of daylight. As we go into the beginning of November, we'll actually continue to slim down that window as we go all the way into the first official day of winter, which will be around December 20th, December 21st, a couple days before Christmas until we get the winter season going. So long range models, let's see if we have a change in this pesky weather pattern. And I say pesky because we're getting to the point where we could definitely use some rain. We've had below average temperatures, which have been nice, but we've steadily seen those warm up over the course of this past work week. Definitely some warm afternoons have been in play. We hit 90 this past Wednesday, hit 92 this past Thursday, and still forecasting some 90s for the beginning of the weekend. So it looks like Monday, nothing definitive in the way of rain chances. The rain chances are far greater in the states to the north of us. It remains that way for Tuesday. But as we go into Wednesday, there's finally some signs of more widespread and maybe more organized rain, indicated by some overlapping areas of the green and the blue colors that you see on the GFS and the European models. This is Wednesday at 5 p.m. It looks like the rain going to make an entrance in the later half of Wednesday, maybe lingering into early Thursday morning. This does look promising, however, as we go into Thursday afternoon and evening. Yes, the rain chances aren't smack dab over central Georgia, but we'll get some fluctuation. These long-range models, as you know, each and every time we show them, they are far from set in stone, but they give us an idea about the rain chance potentials as we head well into next week. And take a look at this. This actually looks like a good indication of a frontal boundary, just seeing these shaded areas pop up, maybe kind of a bit of organization along the curved boundary that's trying to push into central Georgia. And hopefully this is going to be the scenario that plays out. We get some widespread rain towards the end of the work week next week. And if we have an actual frontal boundary that's trying to pass through towards the end of next week, hopefully it can usher in through Friday, because that means Saturday would be nice and clear. And obviously next weekend is going to be a very, very big weekend between the Ryder Cup, between some really big college football matchups, Ole Miss LSU squaring off, Penn State Oregon squaring off. I know our David Guerrero is going to be excited about that. But just an hour and a half north of us here in Macon, in Athens, there is a big-time game, Georgia and Alabama squaring off. So hopefully we can get some clearer conditions for that. But any tailgate watch parties that you may have here in central Georgia, we're going to keep our fingers crossed that clear conditions and maybe even some cooler conditions follow in behind that frontal boundary that looks to pass through in the later portion of the work week next week. 64 for a morning low on Monday. These numbers steadily get warmer, so it looks like we'll actually be a couple degrees above average for most days of the work week as of next week. 64, that average low this time of year. Take a look at that. 68 for a morning low next Thursday. This is definitely going to do some fluctuation, maybe go down, maybe go up until we get closer and closer. But 68, let's just say that's what we hit next Thursday morning. Obviously, that's going to be really close to the 70-degree mark, but that's going to be more reminiscent of a summertime morning as opposed to the pleasant feel that we've had each and every morning. And along with that, I imagine the dew point temperatures are probably going to hover within the range of that actual low temperature as we kickstart your Thursday morning. Afternoon high temperatures, 89 on Monday, 91 on Tuesday, 90 Wednesday, and then an 88 on Thursday. So once again, just above average for each and every day for the next 7 days, but right there around the 90-degree mark. You may be a degree or two below, you may be a degree or two above that 90-degree mark, but virtually each of the afternoons for the first 4 days of the work week are going to feel predominantly the same as we head into the last official full work week of September, I do believe, once we get, yes, because the Georgia-Alabama game will be the 27th, so we'll be getting to the tail end of September, which is very, very hard to believe. Georgia National Fair will be kicking off in the very beginning of October. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But past your 7-day forecast, what looks to be in store? Well, this is maybe not a very promising graphic if you're hoping for some of those fall conditions to settle in, some of those cooler temperatures like I'm definitely keeping my fingers crossed for. Not only are we above normal, but we are a couple boxes over into the above average category. It's looking pretty likely that September 26th into October 2nd, so that's going to be next Friday all the way into the following Thursday. Looks like a pretty good probability of above normal temperatures. And now this doesn't mean it's going to be mid and upper 90s. This does mean that your average high temperature around that time frame, which will probably be around 85 or 86 degrees, that number continues to get a degree lower every couple of days. So I do imagine we'll probably have some upper 80s, near 90s in the near future. We don't look to have too much change with that. Maybe not the best indication that that front moving through towards the end of the work week next week is going to give us some cooler and drier air. But take a look at this. This is actually a promising outlook right now. We're only one box over of near normal, but we do have a slight probability of some above normal rainfall for that period of September 26th into October 2nd. And you can see this darker green shade in the circle or oval up in northern Alabama going into Tennessee, portions of Mississippi. That would be one box over to the right of where central Georgia does fall, but it looks like the southeast maybe could receive some above normal rainfall in the foreseeable future, and that would be a very good thing, and we'll talk about why that is in just a little bit. So the first day of fall, that will be happening in 3 days. Still going to take a while until we settle into some of that cooler air. My rule of thumb is generally towards the tail end of the Georgia National Fair, right after the fair ends. That's when we'll finally start to get some cooler temperatures in the forecast. Maybe start forecasting some highs in the 70s, some morning lows in the 50s. It's my favorite time of year, and hopefully many of you do share that as well. And speaking of the start of the fair, we did say we were going to talk about it. Less than 2 weeks away. 13 days until the official start of the Georgia National Fair, which will be on October 2nd. So that was the very end of that range that I was showing you on the 8 to 14 temperature and precipitation outlooks. And then past that, we go into all the fall fun that October does have to offer. Halloween will be in 42 days, so that's coming up a lot quicker than you realize. And then Election Day going to be the following Thursday after Halloween, marking the beginning of November. I believe Election Day is on November 4th to be specific. 46 days until you'll be heading out to cast your ballot for whatever races we have locally or even nationally. So obviously getting into those last couple months of the year, we're in the Burr months right now. It'd be very appropriate if we actually had some Burr weather to pair up with September, October, November, and December. But we know it will come sooner or later, hopefully sooner rather than later. But the cooler air is going to follow behind all of the festivities that we have for the fall season that we're heading into. So Tropical Storm Gabrielle, we're continuing to keep a close eye on the tropics. We are still well into the thick of hurricane season. Tropical Storm Gabrielle formed as of this past Wednesday. So that was going to be at 11 a.m. on Wednesday. It was Tropical Depression 7 for a very brief moment in time, but we continue to get these updates 4 times a day, 5 a.m., 11 a.m., 5 p.m., and then 11 p.m. Tropical Storm Gabrielle has not done much strengthening. You can see the satellite imagery is a little bit more organized than what we have been looking at the last couple of days. It has just looked like widespread cloud cover and didn't look like it really had much circulation with it whatsoever. But Tropical Storm Gabrielle is maintaining winds of 50 miles per hour. Pressure has not wavered over the last 24 hours, still sitting at 1,004 millibars. Again, my kind of rule of thumb is once you dip below that 1,000 millibar mark, that's when you really start to see some good signs of strengthening, maybe even into a higher end tropical storm, into a potential Category 1 hurricane, moving to the northwest at about 12 miles per hour. So not much change in the direction as well. It's going to continue to move to the northwest, but steadily start to turn up towards the north. By the time we go into some portion at the end of the weekend, I do believe Tropical Storm Gabrielle will strengthen into a Category 1 hurricane and eventually forecasted to gain Category 2 status as we go into Monday at 9 a.m. with 100 mile per hour winds. It doesn't stop there though. This is still a very warm sector of the Atlantic Ocean. Category 2 hurricane with 110 mile per hour winds by Tuesday morning. And then as it moves up across the higher latitudes of the Atlantic Ocean, that's where some cooler water will be present in this portion of the North Atlantic. Wednesday at 8 a.m., 85 mile per hour winds. So then Gabrielle will likely begin the weakening trend and not have too much more of a lifespan as we go into the second half of the week next week. So the big thing with this, as we've gotten our cone forecast, the very first cone forecast had it going straight towards Bermuda, and then maybe not necessarily certain about what's going to happen with Gabrielle past that point. Well, with each update we continue to get, we have seen this northward turn, and not only that, continuing to move back out to the northeast in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And the very important thing is not only dodging the United States. Obviously, you can take a look at this cone forecast. Basically, all the models are in good agreement that we are going to see this turn back out to sea, and Gabrielle will stay at sea. But moving over towards the east of Bermuda now, seeing a lot better agreement. That cone continues to slim down, which will be very good. I mean, it's a Category 2 storm by the time it's passing by Bermuda. Some impacts will be felt there, but if you have any cruise plans out there into the western Atlantic Ocean, you're definitely going to want to keep a close eye on this storm. But other than that, unless you're walking your dog in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, this storm is not going to impact us whatsoever, turning away from the east United States, and it's moving over towards the east of the path Hurricane Erin did take. Hurricane Erin got really close to coastal areas of North Carolina and Virginia, and that was the closest impacts we've seen from any tropical system so far. But Gabrielle is forecasted to strengthen into the second hurricane that we've seen so far this year, obviously Hurricane Erin the first. So it's still been a relatively quiet period in the tropics, and this doesn't look like it's going to pose any impacts. Do we have anything else that we're looking at down in the tropics? Well, in fact, we do. We do have another tropical wave that is moving off the west coast of Africa. These updates are going to happen at some slightly different times of the day, 2 a.m., 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and 8 p.m. each and every day. So these are kind of the in-between updates that we get between the updates for Tropical Storm Gabrielle. First things first, what we were monitoring over the course of this past week was actually this tropical wave that's well into this yellow shaded area. It's continued to really just not have much circulation. It was just some heavy showers and some thunderstorms that probably brought some pretty heavy rain to the Cape Verde Islands. But there's still a whole lot of dust across this area of northwest Africa. All these tropical waves are trying to move kind of off the southwest corner of the western coast of Africa, but you can see where that yellow X is indicated. That's the wave that we're watching now. So it's not the same wave that we were monitoring over the course of this past week, but still very similar chances of development as that wave did have. 0% chance of developing over the next 48 hours and a slim 20% chance of developing past that 48-hour window. This system is going to be very slow to develop because of all of the drier air and the Saharan dust that it is encountering over in this portion of the Atlantic Ocean, the far east Atlantic. So we'll continue to keep a very close eye on it, but as of right now, it's nothing of concern. Tropical Storm Gabrielle is nothing of concern, so we don't have anything that we're really monitoring in the tropics as of right now. But crossing off Gabrielle off the 2025 Atlantic Basin Hurricanes named list, that was the 7th named storm that we've had so far in hurricane season. So we've now officially crossed off all of the named storms over here on the left column of your screen. Obviously, not too many of these storms have had some impacts here in the United States. Hurricane Erin did send some pretty nasty rip currents and some really large waves across the east coast of the United States. Other than that, didn't pose many impacts. Chantal did result in actually some flooding that did move onshore and into portions of upstate North Carolina and the remnants of Tropical Storm Barry. Yes, all of that moisture was a big factor in contributing to the hill country flooding over in central Texas about a month or two ago in time. So yes, these systems don't necessarily need to even be tropical storm status. They don't even need to be hurricane status to pose some drastic impacts, but very thankfully, a lot of them have decided to stay out to sea. But we've crossed off Gabrielle, so that is the G letter name. The next name to claim would be Umberto, so that would be our 8th named storm of the 2025 hurricane season, and we'll continue to monitor that tropical wave to see if that wave is going to get its act together and claim that H name. But the H name is very important. Take a look at this. This is last year's hurricane season. August 12th of last year, we had Hurricane Ernesto form. That was our E-named storm. But then it took nearly a month for our next named storm to form. That was on September 9th, one day before the official peak of hurricane season last year. Hurricane Francine did form, and Hurricane Francine made landfall over in Louisiana, sent us our fair share of some showers and some thunderstorms on the outer bands of rain. But the period in between when Hurricane Ernesto and Hurricane Francine formed, that marked the then least active tropical period in 56 years. So obviously it wasn't very active at the beginning of last year's hurricane season, with the exception of Hurricane Beryl, which did get Category 5 status very, very early, uncharacteristically early in the hurricane season. So it looked like last year was going to be below average. Well, we got a late start to hurricane season, and just because you get a late start to something doesn't mean that you can't end up having a very, very active season. Just 2 days after the formation of Hurricane Francine, we had Tropical Storm Gordon form on September 11th, at one day past the peak of hurricane season last year. Took us a little bit, about 13 days to be exact, but then September 24th, the infamous Hurricane Helene formed down in the Caribbean. We need no reminder of the impacts that Hurricane Helene had here in central Georgia and along with other areas down in Florida and especially up in the western North Carolina mountains. So the 2024 season, this was the pace that it was at. 6 named storms before the official peak of hurricane season. After we crossed that peak, after September 10th, we had double the number of named storms after the official peak, and most notable Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton that did impact western areas of the Gulf Coast of Florida. Now the 2025 season, well, we've been right on pace with 2024, even in fact a little bit behind it. 6 named storms before the official peak, still forecasting 7 to 12 named storms before the end of hurricane season, and we've gotten one of those already, which is Gabrielle, that did just form. So let's circle back to kind of the numbers that we forecasted for the hurricane season this year. On average, we typically see 14 named storms, 7 of which do get hurricane status. So that's once you get winds of 74 plus miles per hour. And of those hurricanes, 3 of them on average are typically some major hurricanes. Now, we've had no major hurricanes so far in the hurricane season. Actually, I stand corrected. I believe Hurricane Erin at one point was of Category 3 status, but 3 major hurricanes. That does mean hurricanes Category 3 or greater in nature. Well, let's take a look at Colorado State's forecast, and they actually give us set numbers in our forecast. They forecasted 17 named storms, 9 of which are hurricanes, and then 4 major hurricanes. So right now we're well below the threshold of all of those. NOAA typically gives us a range, so this is kind of the range. The bottom end of the range is below average, but the upper end of the range, and most of these values within this range are going to be at the average mark or above average. So NOAA said anywhere from 13 to 19 named storms this hurricane season, 6 to 10 of which will be hurricanes, and then 3 to 5 major hurricanes, so Category 3 or greater status. We still have a ways to go, but just basing it off last year's hurricane season, of course, yes, we got a late start to last year's hurricane season. It ended up being an above average season. The same thing could happen with this year's hurricane season, but right now, not seeing anything to fret about in the tropics. And speaking of our forecast back home, September's been a very dry month, to say the least. In fact, we are down in the very dry category, to be exact, really flirting with the exceptionally dry category. We've only recorded rain 3 days out of the month in South Bibb County at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. All of those totals have been very minuscule, just a couple hundredths of an inch. So in total, we've only seen 1/10 of an inch of rain in the month of September on average. September is not a very wet month, but 3 inches of rain, just over 3 inches on average for September all time. We're still far below that threshold and very much below the threshold of the record set back in 2004. Just over 12.5 inches of rain in the month of September. That happened when we had a pretty active hurricane season with Hurricane Ivan and Hurricanes Gene sending us some outer bands of rain and some heavy thunderstorms along with that. So with that lack of rain, we got an update to our drought monitor as of this past Thursday, and you can see most of central Georgia finds themselves in the abnormally dry category, which isn't anything to really fret about. This just means that conditions have been dry for quite some time. It's once you start to get into these drought categories. So you can see that tan color indicating a moderate drought. We have some shaded areas of that in the state of Georgia, some of which are very close to us here in central Georgia. So once you get to that category, that's where you really need to make emphasis to water your plants, turn on the sprinklers, make it a frequent activity and a frequent reminder to water your plants. Give anything that you have in terms of vegetation outside a little bit of extra hydration. And I imagine that many of those areas are probably going to build into central Georgia as we get the next release, which will be as of September 23rd, this next coming Tuesday. And then the drought monitor will release 2 days after as we go into the following Thursday. So you can see most areas in northern central Georgia don't find themselves in dry categories whatsoever. I imagine those areas will probably be in abnormally dry categories as we go into next week. And then after that, we're going to have to look out for those tan shaded areas. So it's been a very dry stretch, but fingers crossed, we did see some signs on the long range models of maybe some more widespread rain in the forecast. Any little bit that we can get will go a long way. However, it looks like it's still going to be quite some time until we get rid of these dry conditions, and we haven't had to worry about them whatsoever so far this year with some of the wet months that we've had. We had a very wet August, and we had a very wet May and June. So obviously our year departure of rain, we're still well above average where we typically are in the calendar year in terms of how much rainfall we've received. But when you go through a dry stretch like this, it can lead to some drought conditions, especially given the warm temperatures that we've had. So that's something that will be on the horizon, and us here on the weather team will be closely monitoring. So that's going to do it for your weekend extended forecast. Be sure to circle back to this each day throughout the weekend to nail down the forecast and see what's the latest and how any of our minuscule rain chances maybe get an uptick, maybe impact any outdoor plans that you have. But I think you are looking good to go. You don't really have a good likelihood of seeing rain whatsoever this weekend. Keep all your outdoor plans, maybe bring the rain jacket and umbrella just to be better safe than sorry, and continue to stay updated on the tropics and everything that you need to know weather-wise with David Guerrero over the course of this weekend. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on Monday.